Hi, I'm Bill Holcomb, and today I will be showing you some essential watercolor tips. These will help improve your winter landscapes. You can paint along with me by downloading my free sketch below, where you will also find a list of materials used in today's beginner's tutorial. We get our mop brush and we start with a clear wash of water over the top where the sky is. Halfway down, then we go into a combination of the Winsor Yellow and Light Red, come down to the horizon level, and don't worry about the trees there, you can go right over those. Don't worry about the bushes behind the deer, go over those. Just paint around the deers, which is my first tip, which is negative painting. When we paint around a subject matter, to leave the white paper or a previous color that we've laid down, that's called negative painting. So with our mop brush, starting at the top there whilst we're wetting wet with the sky, coming down, fusing in nicely, leaving little gaps here and there as we get further down the horizon. And my other tip would be on the edges there, use a dry brush. Mop it with a tissue perhaps to mop up the edges to avoid creep back. Then we've got our flat brush, which is my next tip. Use a flat brush when doing cloud formations because this gives you much more control over the flow of the water and the pigment, and instead of it taking on a life of its own, you will be able to direct it where you want it to go. Also, another tip just coming up here, you see me using that tissue? Well, what I'm doing there is I'm taking off some of the pigment and water from the brush so that I don't have too much. And then when I lay that into the wet and wet, I have much more control because it isn't too excessive, it's just the right amount. Then we've dried that off with a hairdryer. We've mopped up the edges with either dry brush or tissue and dried it off with a hairdryer. Now I'm on my 12 brush and I'm laying in a distant hill. This distant hill is a nice color of a combination of blue with a touch of the red, and that helps us define distance. Also, add into what we did earlier, the negative painting is coming into play even more with the deer. And my other tip is, whilst that's wet, to show definition in that distant hillside with the tree line, you can then drop in your darker color at the top and work down. Now we've got our 12 brush and we're doing the water. Remember with the water, always a good tip, that you need horizontal brush strokes. It's at this stage at least. Now when we're dropping in reflections, you can use a flat brush for vertical brush strokes. But to start with, always do horizontal brush strokes for water. Now we've still got our 12 and we're dropping in some darks. We're dropping in, we started with our yellow and our light red, and then we've gone to the blue. And we're working our way up from the near side bank up into the water as it goes into the distance towards the horizon. And whilst that's wet, using the tissue, I have a combination of the Winsor Blue and Light Red pigment, and I'm working my way up. That is giving us a nice contrast, and dried that off with the hairdryer. And for the trees, the main trunks, we've gone to a number 4 type brush, and for the smaller limbs and so forth, branches as we say in UK, well, we'll use a even smaller brush, something like a number 2. And you don't have to meticulously follow the pattern of the branches and limbs here that I've drawn in and are painting now. Just have fun with it and make them up as you go along. There's no defined pattern for this. Remember, with all these classes that I give for free, I'm explaining how we can make use of the watercolor to our advantage, the transparent watercolor, and how to manipulate and control the watercolor on the paper to achieve a good result, rather than you exactly replicating what I do. But of course, you'll try to get close, to say, yeah, I've done that, I've achieved that, I'm proud of myself, which is what I want to see as an end result. But if there are variations in how you lay things out and different trees, you might have 3 trees there or 5 trees there instead of 2 trees there, etc. And then that's fine, just learn how to manipulate the paints on the paper. So we've got our smaller brush, maybe a number 4, and we've got some brush at the base of the trees there and to the left. And then on the right hand side, we will do the same, lay in some brush. And then you can see I've gone to the much smaller brush, a number 2 round, and laying in some nice dark browns. At the edge where we have left our white paper for the snow, and then it comes down to the water, we then use a nice dark brown color to define the edge of the snow landscape there where it meets the water. And for the snow, remember about shadows. That's my next tip. Vary the shadows in snow. There's blues, there's little hints of red here and there, like maroon type colors and that. You can really mix it up. And when you paint, use your brush to lay in the landscape. Look at the flow of the landscape, the way it comes down to the water's edge, and you're directing the viewer's eye down to that water's edge in the way that you're laying in those brush strokes. So continue with those and have it nice and varied. Show little gaps here and there with the shadows and the snow, leaving your whites. That's the English style of watercolor painting, which I give you again as a tip. Leave your white paper for your whites. It's so much more effective in the English style of transparent watercolor painting than using opaque or Chinese white. If you have to resort to using opaque or Chinese white, then okay, you can get by maybe a little bit, but it jumps out at you. It's obvious. It's so clear what you've done. But if you use the white of the paper, it's so much more convincing and effective. And I'm sure you can see that from the snow that we have now in this painting. If that was plastered with Chinese white, acrylic, and all the rest of it, that would be jumping out at you. But now it looks natural to the landscape. So that is my tip. Always use the white of the paper when you can. So we're coming on now quite nicely. We're getting quite close to the end of this tutorial. And there's another tip. When you've got little bits of tufted grass and so forth peeping out from the snow there, use the side of the brush painting technique that I've mentioned so many times. It gives a much more convincing end result when you can scrape in using the side of the brush technique. Then we've got little reflections in the water of the trees there. Just break them up, just little squiggles, just a few, enough to tell a story. Now, another tip, use that flat brush for your ripples in the water. It's so much more convincing when you use that flat brush. Now, because we have used the negative painting technique using the white of the paper for the deers, you can nicely and easily paint in their color. So you've got a nice fawny brown color for the deers, your light red and your Winsor Blue. For this situation, much more strength on the light red than the Winsor Blue. But drop that Winsor Blue in, and the more you drop it in, the darker it will be. And you'll see I never use black in my watercolor painting, so not lamp black or any other black. Don't do it. It jumps at you, it jumps off the page. It is so obvious, it just does not look right. Get your blacks by mixing your watercolor paints. So you can use blue and red and darken it as much as possible. And then you'll achieve your blacks. And here we are. We have a nicely completed essential watercolor tips tutorial in the winter. I hope you've enjoyed that, and please join me again for next time.